Okay, so next up is Lydia Caldwell, and she's presenting her project.
Hi, my name is Lydia Caldwell. Today I'm going to be talking about my senior thesis project, Take It Into Your Own Hands. For this work, I was inspired by COVID and the lack of human interaction. I felt a pressure to keep up with friends and family while not being able to see them physically. There was this universal sense of loneliness that I felt throughout people, and I wanted to make work that addressed this. I decided to use the medium of animation because I felt that it was easily communicable to viewers what was going on. I depicted hands overlapping and having opposite actions, showing the struggle to keep connecting even though we had to. I feel like as humans, we want to communicate with each other no matter what, even if it's difficult or hard. So I depicted this cycle of hands interacting, never quite reaching, but still like they dissolve, fade into one another because they still want to keep trying to be with people. The colors intercept and the hands overlap, but they still don't reach. These are some process thoughts. I worked on plexiglass with markers. Each scene of animation is 90 frames long, running at 8 frames per second. I drew on both sides of the plexiglass, creating kind of stained glass effect and having me work on both sides at the same time. I chose the imagery of hands because I wanted something that people could relate to, and partly because of COVID, the only thing that like we could see of people at some point was like hands. This is the installation view. For the installation, I decided to show the frames next to the final work because it just showed the process that I went through and the difference of the scale between the final work and the way I was working from. The frames are floating from the wall and the shadows create a cool effect and show the different layers, and they kind of glow from the plexiglass.
Great, thanks,
So
Lydia.
yeah, thank
That's
you.
great. You've done a lot of animation before, but can you talk about how this is different than, I mean, I haven't seen anyone do animation on plexiglass like this. Is this
Right.
common or?
Well, animation on plexiglass is commonly used for like it's like paint on glass type animations where you're working from one frame, you're like adding and wiping away paint. But the way I'm using it, I don't think it's common at all. Um, I hadn't done it before, but initially I was working with oil paint, so that's why I chose the plexiglass to work on. But I ended up just liking the effect of marker better.
Yeah, I like the transparency, and like you said at the end there, how it's kind of the light going through it onto the wall is really nice and showing all those layers because you drew on the front and the back, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks so much. And we're gonna go on to Ramon, who's talking about his Life with COVID project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ramon Campirano, and this is my senior project, Life with COVID. Some background before we start. Previously, I had worked on a similar project titled COVID Chaos, but I felt like one semester wasn't enough time to devote to documenting our societal changes. The impact and interactions I captured at the beginning of the COVID pandemic are not the same as the interactions I've come across 6 months to 1 year after the start. Every specific interaction during this time is different based on who is part of the interaction, their level of comfort with one another, and their level of comfort with COVID. No, this is the end of COVID chaos and are now moving on to life with COVID. When COVID entered our lives, it created a new normal and quickly altered our traditional methods of human interaction. I believe that these shifts in our day to day life and normal routines must be captured and preserved so future generations can see how easily the world and our relationship to one another can change. My ideal audience is for future generations. And I believe, like, pandemics such as this and other similar world altering events tend to take place once every 100 years. The large time gap between these events allows for those who truly live through it and remember what it was like to die before the next one takes place. We have seen this time and time again, from the influenza pandemic of 1918 to World War II and the Holocaust. And back then it was a lot harder to document these events, especially during World War II, where film had to be hidden. And although there are many photos of what took place there was much more that was lost. And now technology has advanced since then, and it's now easier to take photographs and spread our surroundings for those who will be on this planet after we've passed on. Preserving our history and how we reacted to this pandemic is how our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, and so on, will be able to improve our society and learn from our ignorance. I decided to shoot with a digital camera, really just because it was a lot easier, and really it was. I wanted to reduce the risk of getting COVID because I wasn't able to like go and develop my own film. Um, and I also got a lot of my inspiration from Lee Freelander and his work of America by Car. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. We have 2 minutes for questions. And remember, you can also put comments in the chat.
Ramon, would you be able to say what the biggest change was or changes were, some of the most significant changes going from, the spring semester COVID chaos project to this one?
Before it was more like people were, more inside, kept inside their homes. Um, the whole COVID chaos, I really got lucky with that. It was, people were against getting vaccinated, and that was the only point I really saw when people were out versus now, where people are, more comfortable in going out all the time. They don't care.
Ramon, did you have specific locations where you shot the photos or would go back to?
Yes, I tried to go to areas that were, I knew people were gonna be there, like, South Congress or the Capitol, South Park Meadows, but I always kept in mind to like keep my distance. So yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, you see
How did
the
people
chat.
react to you for when you were photographing? Did you get any reactions from people?
I did get some reactions. Well, I really only got one reaction, and it was when I went to Bed Bath and Body Works, and people were waiting out online for like a discount, and like I got in front of the line and took a photo, and she just like stared daggers into me. But that was the only time.
Okay, thanks so much, Ramon.
Thank you.
All right. Our next presenter is Yang Bing Murphy Chen with her project Breaking Stone of Diasporic Illegality. Why should Chinese stay?
All right, I'm going to share screen right now. And thank you everybody for coming. Let me know if you can see my screen. All right, hello everybody. My name is Chen Yanbing. I go by Murphy, and this installation I want to dedicate it to my mother, Guo Yan, my extended family, Larson and Wangs, and my professor here in St. Edward's University. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself and reason why I created my works first. Since I was 10, I have been migrating in diaspora and in and out of China. I moved to United States alone short after I turned 18. And during the last summer of the Trump administration, most foreign nationals legally and or illegally staying in the United States were blindsided by the radical, sudden immigration policy changes. As an F1 student visa holder, I'm one of them. So facing the threat of deportation, I pleaded to my university's professors, chairs, deans, and provosts for remedy and protection. So mounting on numerous xenophobic attacks on physiognomy, nationality, accent, and gender, which I directly and or indirectly encountered in the past, the summer of 2020 was by far the most devastating. I cannot rationalize why a country built by immigrants would hand out free lottery citizenships in France, where people have no immediate need to migrate, while forcefully shoveling out refugees, working class immigrants from Africa, Middle East, South Central America, and Asia. Isn't the basis of humanitarian value supposed to better the living condition for all, not just those who of privileged background and of Anglo-Saxon descents? So to me, diaspora is so much more than just living abroad. Diaspora stands for stepping into the unknown alone and fighting for chances of survival. It is the brave act of the most desperate and the most hopeful. It takes a mountain of strength to leave everything behind and step into the unknown. So naturally, I am drawn to art made by and made for immigrants. When I started this project, I asked myself, how can I render a group of people who are marginalized and poorly documented by mainstream history? The first generation Chinese immigrant, the railroad Chinese, were one of the most forgotten people in the history of the United States. So my concept of making a portrait without figuratively portraying is my response to anti-Chinese sentiments and the invisibility which Asian American and Chinese in the diaspora have experienced from the enactment of 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act to today. And in the early 20th century, the railroad Chinese, they traveled to the United States to seek for a better life. And most of them were hired by American railroad companies such as Union Pacific to build a transcontinental railroad. Their shared layers of collective complex personhood were buried in legal doctrines, contracts, physical laboring sites, maps of the railroad, and mugshots of their deportation certifications. So through layers of transparent vellum papers and method of superimposing, I aim to reveal their diasporic personhood and give back their visibility. They were the stone breakers who couldn't break the stone of the racial and legal restraints to their diasporic existence. And after generations of scapegoating and discriminatory experience, we're finally starting to remember them. They belong here and they matter too. So my process of making this installation includes 5 parts: researching, synthesizing, refabricating, painting, and installing. For the first step, researching, I conducted a deep dive into the Library of Congress's digital database, hunting for primary documents in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And this summer, hopefully, I will be able to further my research by working with the Law Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And if you have any further question regarding the details of my work, please feel free to visit my website here and come to chat with me in the breakout room momentarily. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Murphy. Murphy's taking questions in her breakout room because she had a longer presentation. That was our negotiation. So we're gonna go on, great job, to our next presenter, who is Taylor Gonzalez, and he's presenting his work, Gonzalez Family Spaces.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Gonzalez, and today I'll be sharing with you my ongoing photography project titled Gonzalez Family Spaces. Over the past 2 years, I've been working on documenting the unique spaces and relationships of my family in order to save the personal memories of my childhood. I grew up in a large Hispanic family, each member influencing the person I've become today. Up until college, I would spend a great amount of my free time with different members of my family, genuinely enjoying each and every second I spent with them. Most of my cherished childhood memories are playing at my cousins' houses or the backyard parties involving the whole family. The Gonzalez's tight relationships always allowed for unconditional love and security within my small world of Galveston Island. After graduating high school and moving to Austin, my family suffered the losses of my grandma Chawa and Uncle Tino. Losing my grandma and uncle was tough for everyone in the family. It was as though we just lost the glue that held us together. Soon after the passing of Chawa and Tino, I began photographing the intimate spaces of my family that had become heavily associated with my personal childhood memories. I began this idea on a trip to Minnesota in 2019 while photographing the backyard of the oldest member of my family, Carlos Gonzalez. I remember as a child flying to Minnesota during the summers and playing in my grandfather's playground of a backyard. Though I did not visit often, I always found myself reminiscing of the experiences I had in this intimate space. This series, titled Carlos's Backyard, became the foundation of my senior project, projecting me to capture as many childhood memories as I possibly could. For this project, I set out to document the history of the Gonzaleses as well as the significant changes that are taking place within. I began with photographing the home of my grandma Chawa. This house has been in our family ever since their migration to Texas in the 1950s. Many of my family members, including me, have lived in this house sometime or another, giving this house a significant role in our family's history. As I photographed Chawa's home, I didn't realize how quickly the external characterizing features began to fade away from what I once knew it. I started to realize the effects of time on familial relationships, influencing me to capture the rest of my family's memories before they soon disappeared altogether. I then took this realization and began applying it to the documentation of my other family members and their intimate spaces. The final outcome and installation of this project is a series of medium format images that are presented through inkjet prints and a photographic slideshow. After going back and forth on how I should present an ongoing photographic documentation of my family, I decided to develop a display that might look like it came straight out of one of my family members' homes from when I was a child. Most of the photographs are presented through an old tube television and VHS tapes. My goal with this installation and its chosen mediums were to remind me of the times when my family was closer together while bringing a relatable sense of nostalgia to whoever views it. Gonzalez Family Spaces is a preservation of my childhood memories while driving the idea of vulnerability of family over time. Thank you all for listening to my presentation, and please feel free to join my breakout room. Thanks.
Thanks, Taylor. So we have about a minute and a half that we can use for questions.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead. The other person can go. Oh, okay, I was just going to ask Taylor. I'm curious if you're still working on this, and then will you continue the project, after school?
Yeah, definitely. I just like this semester, I haven't really had that much time to go out and take more pictures just because I've been working on the installation and gallery part of it. But I definitely want to continue doing this just so I can have just as many pictures of my family as I possibly can and just have almost just like an encyclopedia of the Gonzalez family almost. So I'll definitely be continuing this over probably my whole life. So
Thanks.
So Taylor, this is a documentation of your own family, but do you see that there's any universality in this project? And if so, what would that be?
I think so. When I first started this project, I thought it was me documenting a really close bonded family, but as I started going and taking more pictures and diving more deep into the subject, I kind of figured out that we're slowly starting to drift away from this tight bond that we have, and I've been noticing it more and more, and especially after taking pictures, I've been noticing it. And so I think the universality with it would be in my view, it's I guess not taking your family for granted and making sure that you recognize the importance of these relationships in your life and these experiences and how they shape you as a person. If that answers your question.
Mary, did you have a question?
I was thinking along, I guess, somewhat along the same lines. I'm still trying to think about, how to make those connections, because we all have that, or at least some of us do have that family in the background, and that house and those spaces, the back porch room, for instance. And there should be ways to tap into that and make it connect more, not just about you, but to stir those memories for the rest of us.
Mhm.
The promise is there.
Thanks so much, Taylor. We're out of time, but remember, you can go to Taylor's breakout room and talk to him more.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Tori Gonzalez. And let me. Tori's going to be talking about her project, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Hold on just a sec.
No problem. I will also start off by saying I apologize for not being able to be on screen. A little bit of a circumstantial issue on my end, but since we're here to see the work anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. So my project is based around the cultural and spiritual beliefs I was raised with as someone of Hispanic and Native American descent, more specifically the experience of being an empath and being raised to use that ability to learn how to heal people that are in need of it or that specifically request it, people I come in contact with throughout my life. And each of the items within the project represent some part of that, either within the ritualistic aspect of a healing practice, or in the case of the mirrors, more of the personal experience that I have on my end, the aftermath of actually doing a healing ritual, or the aftermath of coming into contact with somebody and sharing energy with them. So I'll start with describing everything that is on the table as a jar. These are spell jars that are used for the healing rituals. They can also be carried with you around as a more like personal totem. You can put different materials in them depending on a specific spell or depending on if they are personal items to you. A lot of the jars that I have here include sacred herbs. There's sage in there. There's lavender, which you see on the table as well. There's chamomile, there's eucalyptus. There are all these dried herbs, dried flowers, and then white candles, which are also very significant for healing within my culture's beliefs. All of these items are set on the table as a way of protecting the energy that the people bring to the gallery space, but also ideally, if I were to give these items to someone that requested a ritual, a healing ritual for themselves, they would be able to take it home and display it or carry it around, and it would help them absorb negative energy within their personal space and expel it and get rid of it. As far as the mirrors, this again is supposed to be a representation of the immediate contact that empaths have with other people. Whether we want to or not, we will absorb other energy. It will overwhelm us. It'll invade our personal space. And so the most common way that manifests for most people is that it will kind of start to feel like you have arthritis in your hands, especially if you've actually performed a healing ritual on somebody. Your hands will ache. They can ache for several days. They can ache for several weeks, depending on how strong of a negative energy the other person had when they came in contact with you. So the hands are these gnarled positions. They're very rough texture, very graphic. And again, the mirror, as soon as someone comes to look at the display, it's an automatic response. They're going to be reflected in these hands that are representative of the healer's hands. It's going to be this immediate feedback. And when you're in that sort of situation, you would need all of these healing tools around you. You would want to sort of get rid of that energy as much as you could. And so again, that's why those are set up with this little protective barrier almost to try to cleanse the space. Unfortunately, there is also an added element that goes with that idea of sensory overload that online we can't experience it. There's of course the scent of the flowers, there's the scent of the herbs themselves, and there's the scent of essential oils that would also be used ritualistically. And of course, just the general contact of being in front of the mirrors. You see it in some shots where what is supposed to happen is that you're supposed to have that visual response of yourself. But even in these photos, you see glimpses of the project's intentions. But I'll take any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions? We have a couple minutes.
I'll check the chat since I usually forget about those. But anyone else as well, please.
Tori, if you weren't doing this in a group show, if you owned the space, what would you do to sort of more own it?
I would absolutely love to do a larger altar installation with our practice. And as people that routinely do this, some people can do this as a living, like an actual career. You can be paid for it. It's up to personal preference, of course, but they like to have a very large space to have these items to practice. Mine personally is small, so this kind of felt natural for me to do it smaller. But if I owned this whole gallery to myself, I would probably do, I'd say maybe half a wall of a larger series of items, definitely far more paintings, larger scale mirrors and paintings, and then expand on the idea. Initially, I had the concept of sculptures that had these herbal elements embedded inside of them. But I would play around with the idea because there's so much, and this is something that more recently has come into pop culture in good ways and bad, but a lot of people are more aware of what some of these elements mean. I see in the chat, someone said that as a practicing occultist themselves, they understand the importance of items and the ritualistic tools. So this is something that a lot of people know about, maybe not in the same extent, of course, as if you do practice, but I would like to give a sort of an experience within the space if I had the space itself, but also the funds to do so.
Thanks so much, Tori. We're actually out of time, but please join Tori in her breakout room where you can talk to her more.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Grayson Jackson discussing her project Stacks.
Hi everyone, my name is Grayson Jackson and my senior thesis project is called Stacks. Growing up, I remember waking up in the morning and instantly having a stomach ache. My parents would assure me that I wasn't sick and off to school I went. It began to become more of an issue as I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder at a young age. As someone who is very hard on themselves and a perfectionist, school has always been a source of anxiety for me. The art classroom was and continues to be a safe haven for me, where I can take a deep breath and decompress. This project is important to me because my goal as an art teacher is to create a welcoming and safe space for my students to explore creativity while learning to decompress and cope with mental illness. I found a love for process-based art, particularly printmaking. The act of carving out the linoleum block, mixing the paint, rolling it onto the brayer, and then onto the plate is very therapeutic for me. My goal for my project is to express the importance of process-based art as it allows you to be super focused on a task and to incorporate these beneficial art-making processes into the K-12 classroom as a way for students to relieve their anxiety or depression. As I was considering what I wanted to make for my senior project, I knew I wanted to make something that was process-oriented. Process-based work is something that is very important to me, as it's been a positive way for me to express my emotions and to cope with my anxiety. My interest in process-oriented work has always been high, but it was peaked during my junior year of college when I took printmaking. For the first time in a long time, I was able to calm my racing and worrying thoughts. Shown are my final prints called stacks. And I chose to experiment with paper and ink, and I decided to work with color in a whimsical and fun way. Each one of the stacks varies in color, form, size, and pattern. They each represent my struggle with my anxiety and depression, especially in this time of the coronavirus. Last semester, I felt like I was in a really low and negative space mentally and emotionally. I felt like one issue and disappointment was stacking on top of each other until it got to the point where I felt like I could crumble. I want to carry this project into my classroom when I become a teacher. Whether I'm teaching art to elementary students or first grade, it's important to me to give my students opportunity to make process art. Along with stacks, I created a lesson plan that can be taught in schools or at home. It integrates different techniques so that the lesson is meaningful and challenges students to think critically while also being able to create process-based art. My hope in choosing my materials and techniques for this project is that it will inspire others to try process-based art in their free time or to integrate it into their classrooms. Thank you.
Thanks, Grayson. We have time for a couple questions. Grayson, I wanted to actually ask you a little bit about your lesson plans. Like, how did you take your personal print project and turn it into something for elementary school children?
Yeah, so I really wanted to create a lesson plan that incorporated different subjects. So for my lesson plan that I will talk about in my breakout room, I incorporated science into it. And so my students would be doing an anatomy of a flower lesson plan and making prints out of that by learning the anatomy of a flower and then incorporating printmaking into that subject. So that's kind of my idea behind the lesson plan.
There's a question in the chat, Grayson, have you thought about going into art therapy?
Yes, I did when I was first starting out in college. And then I got really interested in education, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm not blocking out the opportunity to do art therapy, but for now, I definitely want to try teaching.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Please join Grayson in her breakout room where you can learn more. And we're going to go on to our next presenter, who is Allison Moore, and she'll be talking about her Memory Boxes project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Moore, and my senior project is called Memory Boxes. I have always been very interested in personal reflection, which led me to create my projects, which are individual miniature sculptures of little scenes from my childhood. I make the scenes out of craft materials. Here's an example of one called sledding. You can see the pillow stuffing and the dolls going down the sleds. I make the pieces in a general way with neutral colors and faceless figures because I enjoy when people have the opportunity to place themselves into the happy scenes. And I feel like the craft materials makes it more open to people and in their own personal experiences with fabric and yarn and dolls from their own personal childhood as well. Here is another example called Lake. There's 4 people looking out over the water. And in each piece, I love to add details from moments and memories that stick out to me. So, you know, you can see the bag and the floaty and the popsicle. And they change from scene to scene, whatever I remember most. Here are some images from the gallery installation. So there is the berry scene and monkey bar scene. Each piece brings on different challenges, obviously, because each thing has different components. And overall, they are a pretty big exploration into what people respond to. And very often when I show the pieces, they would start to tell me stories about having similar memories or their experience with dolls or materials, which is what I find so rewarding about this body of work. Here are the final images I would like to share. So there is the pool scene, and here is how they are displayed in the gallery. And that's all I have to share. Thank you for listening. I'm excited to hear any further questions about the projects.
Thanks, Allison. So we can take some questions now.
Allison, are they always all individual, or have you thought about doing anything more sequential with them?
I've thought about doing like large like doll houses and kind of having them all lead into one another. So I have thought about doing sequential things, but at the moment they are kind of individual moments, like in the way that memories kind of show up to me. They're more individual.
Yeah, I was just thinking if you got into sequential, it could be very interesting to try and draw connections.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the, you titled it Memory Boxes, and they're not in boxes, or they aren't boxes. So where does that come from?
They used to be in boxes. And I took them out of the boxes, and that was kind of the only piece that I left of that like older version of the project. I was kind of sentimental.
Why did Why did they come out of the boxes? Like, what was the choice in that?
It needed to get out of the boundaries and kind of grow beyond the boxes and like stand on their own. I was relying too much on them, and I needed to move away from it. But I still felt kind of connected to like having this scale almost, you know, keeping them the same size.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, we
have what I really like about the work is that it's you know, it's unique. It's not referential. You're dealing with ideas of like memory, but there's something beyond the individualistic about the work. And I wonder if the thing that maybe becomes resolved is like the placement. So for instance, it's like making your own pedestals that may or may not employ the box or some sort of format again. And I think that that would be a really exciting place to go. And I think that you have a lot of, I think there's a lot of exciting things that is happening with the work. So.
Thank you. It's a very good suggestion.
Okay, thanks so much, Allison.
Thank you.
All right, our next presenter is Emmy Reckling, and her project is called Main Street, Texas.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emmy Reckling. I'm a photographer from Houston, and I'm going to be showing y'all some of my images that were taken from my senior thesis project called Main Street, Texas. So just to give some background information on how I began this project, when I was a freshman at St. Edward's in 2017, Hurricane Harvey hit Houston and the surrounding areas. My home is in Houston, and then my family's ranch is in a town called Rosenberg, which is just outside the city. My home ended up being completely fine, but my ranch was destroyed and totally flooded. And my family and I spent a lot of time there growing up, so it was basically a second home to us. So we were pretty devastated to hear about the state of it after the storm. And it made me realize that I never photographed the place while it was still standing. So that inspired me to drive down and document the state of my ranch after the hurricane. And then a little over a year ago, I decided that I wanted to continue this project, but I wanted to document towns all around Texas. I loved the idea of being able to photograph really unique places before they disappear. So in the beginning, I only traveled to a few towns, including Marfa and Richmond. And I shot photos on medium format color film. When I was brainstorming ideas for my senior project, I decided that I wanted to continue traveling to these towns and photographing them because I felt like there was a lot I could do with this idea that I had. And I was also really passionate about the project since I felt really personally connected to it. I also knew that I could get a lot of great images by traveling around Texas. I focused on taking documentary style photos on medium format color film. I captured images of architecture and unique things that I found on the side of the road that I thought might help the viewers get an understanding of what these towns are like. I wanted to highlight the small things that made these towns stand out from the bigger cities and the suburbs that surrounded them. And shooting with medium format film, it allowed me to take really detailed and sharp images with vibrant color and rich tonalities. I decided to keep the square format of the photographs because aesthetically, I prefer the symmetry that it created in the images. My goal of my work is to provide the viewers with a straightforward and accurate representation of these places that I visited. In the future, I really hope to continue this project and expand it even further. I want to travel to towns all around America and document the similarities and differences between those towns in different parts of the country. So feel free to ask me any questions, or you can visit my website to see some more images from my project.
Great, thanks so much, Emmy. So questions?
Did you limit yourself to only photographing on Main Street, or were you sort of looking at the town as a whole?
So in the beginning, I would basically stay on Main Street when I began the project in just like a few towns. Then I ended up expanding and walking around, but I kept the title Main Street, Texas, because that's where I would drive to and park in each of those towns. I would start there and then I would make my way around the town and then go back to the main street.
Amy, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that it's amazing to see your coming full circle. I was just looking at past gifts from the class, the freshman studies class, and your gift was done in the dark room, was your gift freshman year.
I remember
so you knew what you wanted to do right away.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Emmy.
Thank you.
And everyone, again, please join Emmy in her breakout room. We're going to go on to our next presenter. Lost my notes. Ray Savage is up with her project, Ooh.
Hello, my name is Ray Savage and this is Ew. Ew is a series of 35mm color photographs exploring the concept of grossness, using abstraction in order to break down subjects into their individual aesthetic qualities. I believe that any subject can be made into a thing of beauty with the right perspective, no matter what that subject may be. I tend to gravitate towards unconventional subjects in my artwork, so for Ew, I exaggerate this tendency and shoot objects that most people would take measures to avoid. Abstraction helps make the primary focus of the work aesthetic as opposed to substantive, so an audience can take in the images without prejudice. Since it is not immediately clear what most of these images depict, The subject is understood after any revulsion a viewer may normally have towards the actual content has already been challenged by the opposing aesthetic qualities of the image. They are now able to hold onto both of those conflicting ideas, beauty and grossness, at one time. Ew is a paradox. The ambiguity and contradiction contained within this series is a reflection of the world as a whole. Seemingly contrary forces may not always be what they appear. Most of the images are grouped into diptychs based on a combination of subject matter, composition, and color. I paired pictures with similar subject matter together and pictures with different subject matter but similar forms or color together. But Dead Bird 1 through 4 are the most objectionable pictures in Ew, so I made them into a grouping of 4. It is the picture with the most immediately obvious subject matter, so it acts as a context for the audience, helping to anchor the body of work. This is also why I placed this print in the center of my exhibition space. 2 images, arugula leaves and old chicken, are printed alone, as I feel that they are the 2 strongest standalone pieces in the body of work. They could have been a diptych together, but I preferred to print them separately to cause the viewer to take a closer look and really examine the individual shapes, textures, and colors of each piece. Ew, the fully realized body of work consisting of 18 inkjet prints of scanned 35mm color photographs on 9 individual pieces of paper, invites an audience to look at the world around them in a new way, appreciating beauty where others may see none. Ew will only be the possible spark for this aesthetic perspective. When I first began shooting for this project, my work tended to be more literal. As time went on, my shooting became more and more meditative, and in turn, my images grew more subjective and transcendent. By producing the pictures to help spread this way of viewing, I strengthened that same quality within myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. We have time for a couple questions. Mine's not really a question, but more of a comment. I do find the images seductive and beautiful, especially when I see the print in person. And I just like how it turned out.
Thank you. Oh, any subject matter that was too gross? No, there were some ideas for subject matter I had that I didn't run into that I was like, maybe that shouldn't be on a wall somewhere, but the one that exists that was the grossest probably was the arugula one, because when I was trying to throw it away, I accidentally got some of the juice on my fingers and I almost gagged. It was horrible.
Okay, thanks so much, Ray. Remember, you can join Ray in our breakout room for more discussion. And our next presenter is Tori Stell. Her project is called Pick Me Apart, I'm Used to It.
Okay, there we go. Hi, my name is Tori Stell, and this is my senior project. Overall, as a multimedia artist, my process is constantly changing, and I try to let my interests and life experience navigate the medium and trajectory of my work. Common themes seen throughout my work include topics of cultural identity, intersectionality, and human presence. Pick Me Apart, I'm Used to It is my senior project, consisting of 8 images. And through this project, I am exploring questions that I and others have when it comes to my own cultural identity. Being adopted from China and raised in a predominantly white household, I am constantly questioning the duality of my identity, as I don't feel fully belonging to either of them. This has been especially difficult due to the current political state and rising tensions of our country. For the past year, I've been using additive and subtractive methods to alter and distort images that I took last fall, creating these digital collages. I cut and tore these images and then scanned them into my computer, where I would continue to manipulate them. As a part of my process, I use layering and deconstruction of my own image as I think about the duality of my Asian American heritage. And then one piece I want to focus primarily on how do I get out of this? Let's see here. Is let me find it. Is this one right here, which I think I personally would say is the most successful and conveys my ideas of my project the best. It is a collage of my own self-portrait combined with text from an amendment made back in April of 2020 from the city of Austin. Essentially, it's a statement that the city of Austin put out saying that they don't condone hate crimes or hate speech against Asian Americans, which I think was just kind of like a PR stunt and made me feel not great or secure about anything happening. And yeah, and then I can show you the other ones. Here. And these are all available on my website if you want to take more time to really absorb them. They're also in the gallery as well. So at this time, I will continue to show my slide and will answer any questions y'all have.
Yeah, thank you, Tori. Questions?
Tori, I was curious how do you think the earlier work from the fall semester relates like to the newer work? Do you have your older work also on your website?
I don't, but I can put it on my website. My original work started off with like manual, like physical collages, which I really enjoyed, but it was just very time consuming and didn't really fit into my life well. Between like doing school full time and having 2 jobs, I needed to figure out a way to create while being on the go, which is why I kind of moved digitally. But after doing this, I'd like to go back into the more like manual physical labor of collage making and process-based work, as I will soon have more time to do that. If that answers your question.
Yeah. I was just curious if you started to consider them together. So, but you're right, you'll have time.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much, Tori. Okay, last but not least is Brianna Vasquez, and she's going to be talking about her project Transient.
Okay, hey, my name's Brianna Vasquez. I also go by Bree. Transient is a multimedia piece that incorporates organic forms through biomorphic and non-objective shapes. Through this exploration of these forms, I attempt to express the incongruity that is so often seemingly static in our ever-changing lives. While most of the work resembles transitions and transformations of natural elements, it is also used to capture subtle but visualizations that I want to be lasting moments, evoking and encapsulating our precious thoughts. My senior entry has themes of displacement, identity, time, and space through the manipulation of mixed mediums and applications of transparent materials. Sorry. Mining from childhood memories and the symbiotic relationships of which I've dwelled and recollected on, the ambiguity of these memories is seen throughout the work, and it forms abstracted spaces through methods such as layering and experimentation with these different mediums. also allows for constructing dimensionality and venturing to new possibilities and manipulating what was once recognizable into the unseen and the unknown. The forms capture subtle but continuous changes in memories and emotions. And so throughout the work, it consists of a hanging installation of living flowers that begun at their freshest stage and have eventually, sorry, I don't know how to get out of this slide. So here are the fresh flowers that I originally hung, and I was just playing with their form and kind of the shadow play that they created, which different inks, charcoals, litho crayon, pens, white ink on a synthetic material called Yupo. And so it has this transparency where I manipulated the duality on each side, but tried to reflect that through the hanging flowers, the shadow play, and that, and kind of this overall interaction between the drawing, a 2D work, and kind of pulling that through manipulation and aiming for like dimensionality with the flowers hanging in front of it. And so if you go into the gallery now, these are kind of what most of the flowers look like. So they have changed the state throughout their entirety of their gallery experience, which has only been a few weeks right now. But overall, I think the reason why I chose to do these hanging flowers is because it resembles a space throughout my childhood where we were always surrounded by the presence of hanging flowers. And they varied in stages from being their most beautiful and lively to this decayed, fragile, and delicate stage. And I wanted to show that manipulation of time and space together through drawings that I, like I said, remind through like childhood experiences of just being kind of displaced and moving to different homes, growing up in the military and losing my dad at a young age, and just kind of how that altered this idea of what a home was for me. And yeah, I will be in a breakout room, so feel free to join me, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Bree. I think we have time for one question here, and then we will be moving to the breakout rooms.
Bree, is there anything along the way of, say, preparatory work? Do you do sketches or something that build into those layers, which are really interesting?
Yeah, I have. So I've been working on this for the past year, and this is definitely my largest piece. So I guess you could call it a series. But yeah, I have smaller sketches in my notebook of me just trying to experiment with the mediums, because it is, I feel like it is more process-based. And the process of being in the moment of making this, and the materials themselves have their own way, and you can manipulate them, but they in turn do their own thing towards the end. And so there's only so much that you can do with the material and handling it, I guess. But I do start with smaller stuff, but I also find that it's best just to jump in, thanks to Alex and Hollis, and just like doing it, and yeah, just seeing what the outcome is on the larger scale piece rather than like the smaller prototypes or maquettes.
Okay, thanks so much. We're a little over our time, but that's okay. We still have plenty of time to hang out and talk to our artists and photographers in our breakout rooms. I want to, just for those who maybe aren't familiar with Zoom, and I don't know if this will be helpful or not, but I wanted to just show you this breakout room icon, which may appear in different locations depending on what kind of device you have. Also, if you're on a phone, it may be really difficult to find, but sometimes there's a menu. It just is a few little dots that you check that you click on, and it will make a drop-down menu where you can find the breakout rooms. If you can't figure out how to get into a breakout room, so what happens is if you click this button, it will open another menu and it will have the artist's name and their project name here. And if you hover over the number next to their name, you can click join, or on some devices, you can just click on their name and join the room. I just want to let you know that you can go from room to room, but if you're having trouble or you can't figure out how to get into a room, you can just leave the room you're in and ask me. You'll basically come back to the main room and then I can move you to another room. I'm happy to do that. And also, as we start going to our breakout rooms now, I can do the same thing. So if you can't find the breakout room button or and need help getting into someone's room, just let me know and I'll manually move you over there. So if I could get my artists and photographers to go to your rooms and let me know if you can't get in for some reason.